On the fifth day, Timmy got a visitor while he was resting up in the hospital room after getting more physical therapy, and it was none other than Trixie Tang. As she entered Timmy's hospital room, Cosmo and Wanda hid under the bed in housefly forms to avoid being seen. Timmy felt his heart leap briefly with excitement upon seeing Trixie. He hadn't expected to see her to visit him, so this was a bit of a surprise to Timmy. "Oh, hey there, Trixie," Timmy said. Trixie glanced at Timmy then with a saddened expression. The sight of his almost shone-off face and surgical head wound was distressing for her to see, and she had also forgotten about what Vicky had put him through. "Hey, Timmy," Trixie replied, walking over near the bed. "I thought I'd come and see how you were doing. Me and some of my peers have been worried about you, and so have your friends." "I see," Timmy replied with a bit of a shy voice, yet also with a hint of distress. "I take it you heard of what Vicky did?" Trixie then scowled upon hearing Vicky's name. "Yes," she replied, with a voice filled with hate. I can't believe that she'd do something so cruel and heartless like that. After Vicky got arrested, everyone from our school found out, and now all of Dimsdale knows what she's done." "No surprise there," Timmy replied. "That evil witch deserves what's coming to her. She's ruined so many lives, and I've gotten away with it all this time." "Timmy, there's something I need to know," Trixie began. "Is it true that you beat up Vicky? I heard some of the students talking about it. I'm not sure if it's true or not." Timmy's expression changed from that of guilt upon reminded of that. He remembered that one moment when Vicky had strolled into the recovery room right after his botched surgery in an attempt to possibly mock him. But Timmy had lost his mind entirely and brutally attacked Vicky, almost killing her in the process. At the same time, Timmy's sanity was on ice, and so he wasn't in control of his emotions or judgment. Because of this, Timmy went full rage mode on Vicky and brutally beat her and slashed at her. He even bit her over the fact that the doctors until they had pulled them off of her. Even now, Timmy didn't regret it, but he still dreaded over what could have happened if he actually killed Vicky. It's true," Timmy replied shamefully. "I didn't mean to do it, Trixie. I was angry, scared, frightened, and traumatized." "You don't have to explain, Timmy," Trixie said calmly. "To be honest, if I was in your place, I would have probably done the same thing too. That what Vicky did to you was beyond unforgivable. I can't even begin to imagine what you must have gone through when you..." Trixie paused at the part, not wanting to mention the surgeons working on Timmy while he was fully awake and aware of what was going on, and feeling of it, Timmy seemed to grow visibly uneasy upon Trixie mentioning his botched appendix surgery. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you by reminding you of that," Trixie apologized in a panicked voice. "No, it's alright," Timmy replied. "It's just, I'm still horrified from that day. I've had nightmares every night from it. I've been able to sleep normally at all since then." "I don't blame you at all, Timmy. Anyone who went something through like that would have had nightmares for it for a long time. I can understand why you did it. Why did you also jump off of that building?" Trixie said, hesitant to speak that last part. Timmy still had mixed emotions on that subject. While a part of him wanted to go on, there was still another part of him that wanted to end all the pain. Although Timmy was slowly regaining some of his confidence back, he was still not any closer from being fully recovered mentally. He no longer had any intentions of hurting himself or taking his own life. But Timmy was still very uneasy about the nightmares that he had been having, and was still very nervous about the fact that he had to face Vicky again in court. I don't know what to do. I felt lost," Timmy said, feeling ashamed. "The nightmares, the abuse, the neglect, all of it was driving me crazy. I couldn't take it anymore, so that's why I had thought about ending my life was the only way out." "No," Trixie said, stepping closer to the bed. kneeling down on towards Timmy. Death isn't the answer, Timmy. You're not alone anymore, Timmy. You never were. You've got friends that support you. Your parents are willing to redeem themselves, and I'm here for you as well. I'll admit that I haven't been the nicest to you in the past, but you are really a great person, Timmy. I don't want to see you just end your life simply because you lost control of your emotions. You have so much to live for. Timmy felt warmth in his heart upon Trixie saying that. While she had been known to often act coldly towards Timmy in the past, he knew that she was still a good person. And hearing her say those kind words really eased his spirit. But thanks, Trixie. I never thought you'd say that to me, Timmy replied with a warm smile. Why wouldn't I? I really care about you. You're an amazing person. And there's something you should always know too, Trixie said. And what's that? Timmy asked. I was the one that called the hospital. The car you fell onto was actually my limo, Trixie confessed. When I saw you lying unconscious on the roof of the limo, battered and injured, I was afraid that you would have died from the fall. There was a visible sorrow on Trixie's face as she said this, and Timmy could have also sworn that he saw tears in her eyes. This news also shocked him. Timmy hadn't been aware of the car that had fallen onto had been Trixie's limo, but at the time it hadn't mattered to him. Timmy was at this point of complete and utter despair during that moment, so all he cared about was the ending of his suffering. Yet Timmy found himself actually regretting that choice to end his own life. He had no idea Trixie had these types of feelings for him. Although Timmy had remembered sharing a kiss with her the night before facing the darkness a long time ago. But yet her memories of that event had been erased afterwards. Trixie had started warming up to him again through afterwards, and eventually they formed a close friendship again. Even though Trixie had seen no memory of their first kiss, Timmy had never forgotten that moment, and it was that one memory that always warmed his heart. At this moment though, Trixie seemed to be showing actual feelings towards him, just like before when Timmy was about to face the darkness. I'm sorry, Timmy apologized with a blush. I didn't know. It's alright, Timmy. It isn't your fault, Trixie replied, then actually hugged him. I'm just really happy you're safe. I was so afraid you wouldn't make it. No one's ever been able to survive a fall like that, yet somehow you did. Timmy knew the answer why he survived the fall, but obviously couldn't say it without exposing his fairy godparents. He briefly remembered seeing Wanda and Cosmo transform into airbags before hitting the surface off of Trixie's limo and blacking out. He also realized that he also saved his life, and if it hadn't been for his fairy godparents, he would have surely died from the force of impact. Cosmo and Wanda saved me again, Timmy thought joyously. Maybe it was a divine intervention, or perhaps I have guardian angels watching over me because they wanted me to live my life and understand that I truly have more to live for than I thought, Timmy suggested, briefly shooting Cosmo and Wanda a glance up at the curtain rods. His two fairy godparents smiled happily at Timmy's acknowledgement. That's the only thing I could think of. No one could survive a 100-foot drop like that and still be alive. You really lucked out there, Trixie replied. I sure did, Timmy replied. Just then the door opened up and Mr. Tang entered. Trixie, we gotta get going now, he informed. Alright, Dad, I'm coming, Trixie replied, then turned back to Timmy. I gotta go now, Timmy. I really hope you recover soon. I think I'll be alright, Timmy reassured her. Also, before I go, there is something I've been wanting to do, Trixie replied. Before Timmy could reply, Trixie suddenly leaned forward and shared a kiss with him. Timmy felt his heart soar as their lips touched, and he instantly reminded of the first kiss right before he faced up in the darkness. That moment had filled Timmy with courage and determination, and at this moment, he felt those same emotions yet again. Timmy now realized that he had a lot more to live than he thought. Cosmo and Wanda and the doctor had been right all along, and so had Trixie. Timmy didn't want this moment to end, but he knew all good things had to come to an end at some point. Trixie then pulled back with a cute giggle, then said, "Well, I'll be seeing you." "Yeah, you too, Trixie," Timmy replied with a blush. Trixie and Mr. Tang left the room, leaving Timmy all alone with Cosmo and Wanda. His fairy godparents flew down to his bed in their fairy forms, looking proud. "Timmy, we're so proud of you," Wanda said, embracing Timmy. "I knew you'd see the light sooner or later," Cosmo added. "Yeah, you two were right," Timmy replied, embracing the two fairies. "My life is far more important than I thought, and I have you two to thank for saving me back there from that building. If it hadn't been for you, I don't think I would have survived. First you helped to expose Vicky, and now you saved my life. You both are the best. That's why we're here for you, Timmy. I told you we have your backs," Wanda replied. Timmy felt more grateful than ever to have such a caring fairy godparents like Cosmo and Wanda at his side, and he now felt more confident for it than ever. Timmy decided right then and there that he would have to live his life the fullest, no matter what came his way. He knew he had to face Vicky again, and that thought made Timmy nervous, but he knew that Cosmo and Wanda would be there with him. Those who supported him would also have been there for fun, and Timmy would never give up. He liked to see it go for the end. After 4 more days at the hospital, Timmy was finally discharged and was allowed to return home after being given a thorough checkup. Once Timmy was back at home, his parents informed him that the court date would be given on the next day, and that he needed to show up to give his testimony to the judge. Timmy felt a bit uneasy about the fact that he'd been seeing Vicky in person again, but he knew that this time his testimony would help get her convicted. And that was something Timmy wanted more than ever. For the first time in a while, he was able to sleep well through the night without any nightmares. Although Timmy occasionally had few flashbacks after the botched surgery from time to time whenever he heard sounds similar to the ones in Dimsdale Courthouse or the removal surgery of the appendix. Lucky though, Cosmo and Wanda were there to help him whenever he needed. On the big day when Timmy and his parents entered the courthouse in Dimsdale, along with the jury and the witness, Trixie and her father were also there along with Vicky's parents and Tootie. Some of the doctors and nurses who also operate on Timmy were there in booths as well behind him and his family. Cosmo and Wanda sat on Timmy's shoulders in flea forms to help him out on the case if they need it. Once everyone was in the room, a judge by the name of Derek entered the room and took a seat in the large chair in the center of the room. "Court is now in session," Judge Derek announced. "Please bring out the defendant." 2 officers then entered the door next to the judges and the witness stand, then returned a minute later with none other than Vicky. She was dressed in an orange prison outfit with handcuffs and ankle cuffs around her and her hands and feet. She also had a black eye patch around her blind eye that Timmy had slashed. Vicky had also had a huge bandage wrap around her neck from when Timmy had bitten her, a cast around her broken arm, and there were several bruises on her face. Timmy also felt his heart beating with fear upon seeing Vicky made eye contact with him briefly. She glared coldly at him with what they could be say is described as pure hatred as she sat down in the defendant booth across from Timmy and his family, with the man who Timmy assumed was Vicky's lawyer. "Read the charges," the judge ordered the prosecutor. "Miss Vicky, you stand here today accused of multiple criminal charges, when includes and not yet limited to assault of multiple children, blackmail, theft of personal property, child abuse, consumption of alcoholic beverages under the age of 21, breaking in and entry, sabotage of expensive hospital equipment, attempted murder of a child, and driving a victim to taking their own life." "How do you plead these charges?" the prosecutor asked. Vicky glared at the prosecutor and then said in a cold, heartless tone, "Not guilty." "Why are you pleading not guilty of your own free will?" "Yes," Judge Derek asked her. Yes, I am, Vicky said, still in that cold-hearted tone. Once the judge confirmed Vicky's plea, the prosecutor began to read through the evidence that had been gathered on Vicky, and there were a lot of it. The prosecutor also had no problem explaining every explicit detail, right down to the very point. Most of the evidence consists of Vicky's exploits with other children, and the list was very long. Some of these children were also in the courtroom, in which they give their testimonies to the judge. Upon being asked to clarify if the evidence was true, the jury also played the videos of tapes with Vicky breaking into other children's homes and abusing them, as well as audio tapes of her blackmailing and threatening them, and many of them were disturbing. Eventually, the court got to the video tapes and audio recordings of Tootie's abuse, and the ones really tugged at Timmy's heartstrings and raised in some point of that turning rage towards Vicky. Some of these videos involve Tootie being bitten by Vicky with the use of a broomstick, kicked, punched, and even assaulted in many ways as well. Those parts weren't shown, however, due to how graphic they were, but the audio was very clear, and hearing it made Timmy's blood boil with rage. He clenched his fist on the table in front of him and glanced across the room at Vicky with pure hatred in his eyes. Cosmo and Wanda could see how angry Timmy was getting, so they urged him to calm him down. "Timmy, calm down, hun. Vicky will be dealt with. But please don't do anything harsh," Wanda whispered in his ear. Timmy inhaled slowly and exhaled, trying to calm himself down as more evidence was presented to the court. He also noticed that Tootie was whimpering softly as the evidence of her being abused was shown, and her parents' expressions shame, of disgust, and anger on their faces glared at Vicky, who didn't seem fazed at all being shown. In fact, actually seemed pleased with herself. Timmy could only tell by her expression. Eventually, the court finally began, showing the evidence regarding Timmy and his constant abuse by Vicky, along with the evidence of his botched surgery presented by the doctors and nurses who operated on him. It was a very long list of evidence, but Timmy answered all of the judge's questions as accurately and honestly as he could. A few of the officers who had taken Vicky's fingerprint DNA from the sabotaged hospital equipment shown to the court, confirming that Vicky had indeed been the cause of Timmy's waking up during his surgery. Timmy also gave the court a full detail of what he experienced after waking up during his surgery, and he was left in tears by the end of it. As for Vicky, there seemed to be a slight shift of her mood after hearing Timmy's gruesome story of what he had experienced during his appendix removal surgery. Her expression had changed from smug look to one of concern, and maybe fear. Vicky didn't seem sympathetic about it in any way, but she did seem very uneasy after all this, and it was clearly notable from everyone in the room. Even Timmy had noticed it as well. It was possible that Vicky was feeling some sort of regret. While this seemed highly unlikely, Vicky didn't seem as confident as she used to be once Timmy's mentioned experience from the botched surgery. The Turners were given a brief period of time by the judge to allow Timmy to calm down outside of the courtroom, and after about 10 minutes they returned. Timmy had calmed down, and all the evidence had been presented to the judge, which meant it was time for a verdict. "Miss Vicky, please rise for your sentencing," Judge Derek ordered. Vicky stood up and faced the judge with an expression of cold heartlessness upon her face. "Miss Vicky, before I pass your sentence, I do have quite a few things to say about this case," the judge began. "I've dealt with many cases of teenage delinquents for the past your age, and that some serious things, drugs, underage drinking, DUI, and even petty criminal crimes like theft. However, for you in this case, are probably the worst than any of them combined. The evidence presented is you being more heinous and serious than I could ever imagined. And I could tell you right now that you probably will be facing some serious penalties for this. However, before your sentences is passed, I may ask the witness in your court if they have anything they wish to say. My daughter has a few things to say for the matter," Mr. Tang announced. "Very well. Please approach the stand, Mr. Tang," the judge replied. Trixie then walked up to the witness stand next to the judge, then glanced down at Vicky and Timmy. Timmy and I have been friends for quite a while now, and at first I was about that open towards him. Me, Trixie began. But however, as time passed, I gradually opened up to him, and we became friends. Timmy would often tell me about Vicky and how she constantly abused him in many ways. At first I wasn't sure what to think, since I had no physical proof at the time. However, there were a few times later when I noticed Vicky threatening and treating Timmy in a very cruel way, and several other kids she had babysat after coming forward over time, confessing to the other students at my school about the barbarous treatment they had received from Vicky. And at that point I grew worried for Timmy. When I realized that he had been telling the truth all the whole time, I began to fear for his safety. Trixie then glared over at Vicky. And I was right to fear for him, because I heard what happened to Timmy when he had his appendix removed. Trixie paused as tears formed in her eyes. I ended up crying for hours upon finding out what he went through and experienced what Vicky did. I couldn't sleep normally either. When Timmy tried taking his own life a week ago because of the psychological damage it had caused to this mind, I was practically praying for his life. Trixie then wiped the tears from her eyes and continued. All I have to ask is this, and I am talking to you, Vicky. Trixie glared coldly at the evil teen with eyes filled with hatred. Why? Just why did you do it? Why did Timmy ever do to you to warrant such a cruelty? It's bad enough you bullied him and each time you babysat him, but doing what you did at the hospital was beyond horrible. It was pure evil. You put a sweet, innocent 10-year-old through one of the most horrible, nightmarish experiences of his life. He almost took in his own life because of it. And I can't even imagine the pain Timmy went through on that day because of what you did. Have you no shame or remorse for what you did to Timmy after all those other children? Do you have any humanity at you at all? That's what I want to know. Vicky simply looked down at Trixie, almost in no emotion. It was very clear that she seemed to show no remorse for her actions towards Timmy. And after all the other people she bullied and assaulted, Trixie returned to her seat, still glaring angrily at Vicky. Timmy's mother even stepped up to the witness booth next, then glared down at Vicky with eyes filled with hate and disgust. There are many things I regret in life, and I could name quite a few of them, Miss Turner began, still glaring down at Vicky. But if there's one thing I regret more than anything else in my life, was hiring you as my son's babysitter. I would have never guessed that you'd be capable of doing such things. You did to Timmy, and after all these years, while I admit that was part of it was my fault for not looking in the depths of exactly, and have been going back to your house, you're still mainly to blame for the abuse you inflicted upon my sweet boy. What's even worse is that he even called you out every single time we hired you to watch over him. God-forsaken idiots, me and my husband, simply blew it off as just some childish nonsense. That's a burden that me and Timmy's father will have to bear for the rest of our lives, and we actually decided to take Timmy seriously for once, instead of ignoring the accusations towards you. All these horrible events that have transpired within the last week could have been avoided. Timmy's mother wiped tears from her eyes as she continued. You can't possibly begin to understand the extent of damage you have inflicted on my son, and as a result of the abuse and torture he received at your hands, it's bad enough that you blackmailed, bullied, and tortured Timmy behind our backs and played innocent with your nice act. But what you did to him in that surgery room a week ago was absolutely unforgivable. Timmy's mother broke out in tears as she continued to speak. Because of your vile, evil, and disgusting prank, my son ended up being fully awake and conscious during his surgery to have his appendix removed. And Timmy ended up not only witnessing the whole thing, but he also felt everything as well. The psychological damage and experience inflicted on my son was so horrible that it pushed him to the brink of taking his own life. Divine intervention is the only possible answer I can only come up with in regards to Timmy surviving that fall, because of the other person that did would have surely died from it without some sort of divine protection. While Timmy may have regained some confidence, he still has PTSD and nightmares from that from time to time due to that horrid experience in that surgery room, and he'll have to live with that memory for the rest of his life. Timmy's heart sank upon remembering Cosmo and Wanda saying that they couldn't erase his memory of the botched surgery. He knew that getting over it wasn't going to be easy, at least a bit, but even with some regained confidence. Why would you do something so cruel and heartless and a scheme like that, just like Trixie? I want to know. Why? What possessed you to do what you did to my son? He's such a sweet young boy, and you broke his spirit by doing what you did. There had been no divine intervention. If there wasn't, me and my husband would possibly have been planning Timmy's funeral right now. Do you have any idea how much that horrifies me? Can you imagine the horrible impact a thing like that would have on me, Timmy's father, and all those who care about him? Is there any humanity left in you at all? If there is, prove to me wrong by answering these questions, Miss Turner demanded. Explain to me why you inflicted so much pain and suffering upon my son all these years, and explain to me why you thought it'd be a great idea to sabotage Timmy's surgery, knowing what might happen.